Hello, everybody. Welcome to Choir Practice and Profiling Evil by Mike King. It is so awesome to be with all of you. I see everybody starting to pour in right now. I want to say welcome to Choir Practice, episode 29. Tonight, we're going to be talking homelessness and policing with Police Officer Deon Joseph, a 25-year veteran who's been working on Skid Row his entire career. Officer Joseph's going to paint an image of that community that hopefully will change your thinking in a number of ways. You know, there is so much that we can learn from this discussion tonight, so I hope you'll pay really close attention. Then we're going to go and discuss a new project that we're participating in, and you won't want to miss this announcement, especially if you're some of those Profiling Evil family members living outside the USA. But first, let me just take a minute and shout out to a few of you who have joined Choir Practice tonight. Especially want to thank our mods. Thank you for all that you do to keep things going in here. Folks, anytime tonight, shoot your questions for our guests or for me, and we'll the back office will be watching those and monitoring them and pulling that up. To Sam Costa, hello. To Four Sons Mom, great to have you here. Maui Girl, Mimi J2, it's great to see you. High Priestess Illumination. I hope that Deon and Tory are in the back as they're watching and kind of getting a smile on their faces. They hear some of these names that you all have picked for your screen names. Hannah, it's great to see you. Becky L, Barb Nauman, thank you. Nicole Marie, I see Mom's Jeans and Crime Scenes out there. Thanks so much. Great to see you again. Nicole Marie, Anna Reichel, thanks to everybody. I really do appreciate our mods, and I especially want to take a moment today and thank our channel members, our Patreon members, and all of you who choose to donate through PayPal and Venmo. Your donations, including Super Chats, really help us continue to roll out the kind of quality content that you see. And we recognize some of you are not in a position to do that. Thanks anyway for being here. Your questions are important. What you have to say is important, and your attendance is really important. On that topic of channel memberships, though, I would just say that if you haven't considered a channel membership, you might do it. On the first Monday of every month, we hold a special one-on-one discussion with channel members following Choir Practice. And this is a place where you can jump online with me. You can talk with me. We'll chat about things that you'd like to see coming up. To participate, you need to sign up, and it's just a great way to provide deeper support to the channel. It's the only way you're going to get the advanced notification on videos and podcast releases, special content, and these one-on-one discussions. And you can get into the channel memberships for as little as $1.99 a month. So do that. Now, I want you all to take a minute and hit the chat box and call out the back office. They're going to be teeing up your questions. They'll be interjecting throughout Choir Practice. And I just can't thank them enough for all that they do. I hope that you shout them out in the chat section. And then if you are coming to that channel members chat afterward, you'll get a chance to visit with them. So right off the bat, I want to bring in my special guest host for tonight, Miss Tory Shepherd. Folks, you are going to fall in love with this talented, quirky Australian, and you're going to demand that she come back again and again. Tory, how are you doing?
Mike, all these months you talked about tootling off to Choir Practice. You know what I thought you were doing? I thought you were singing an aria.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have our first guest maybe describe to you what Choir Practice is. But folks, let me tell you a little bit about Miss Tory Shepherd. She is an award. What's that, Tory?
Leave it at quirky. That'll do.
No, there's so much more. Tory is an award-winning News Corp columnist who has regularly appeared on Australian national radio and television, including The Drum and Sunrise. And Sunrise is the equivalent to our Good Morning America, right?
It's the most popular breakfast show, and I don't always get to tune in, but there was a special episode this morning, Mike. You were in the breakfast nooks of, many hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of Australians. So you looked good. There were some funky old photos of you, lots of cool hairstyles.
Yeah, back when I was younger, I wasn't quite as buff as this police officer you're going to meet in a minute here, but yeah, I've got a saying that the older I get, the better I was.
I feel exactly the same way.
Well, that was awesome.
Yeah.
That was awesome this morning on Sunrise, and it was with Sam and Kashi, and it took me a minute to get his name right, but what wonderful folks, and maybe we'll talk about that a little later. But folks, Tory spent 15 years as a full-time journalist and has traveled the world in pursuit of news, particularly in the area of defense. She's a Walkley's judge, a Churchill Fellow, and holds a master degree in professional communication. And the thing that I think is so dang cool is before we ever knew each other, she'd actually downloaded a report of mine and used it as part of her research because her master's thesis included discussions about cults. Tell us about that, Tory.
It did. And look, it was actually before I started my master's, so it was what's called an honors thesis, a baby thesis. Let's go with that. And it was in the lead up to the year 2000. And there are a lot of millenarian cults popping up around there, and particularly in Australia, where there's some really good stargazing, as I'm sure there is in your neck of the woods. So yeah, I was looking at how these cults formed, and also particularly how when they had these prophecies about whether somebody was going to come and take them to a better planet far, far away if they just wore the right color shoes or whatever, how they recalculated. So I used a lot of work by a guy called Leon Festinger, which is called When Prophecy Fails. And it's been interesting recently looking at QAnon, who thought all sorts of great things were going to happen on various dates, and how once people are inside, they just keep recalculating rather than questioning their core beliefs.
Yeah, it is such a fascinating thing, this world of cults. And we're going to talk a lot more about that. And we have talked a lot about that. But I want to bring in our first guest, Tory, who you are just going to be thrilled to meet. Let's all welcome him. Please shout him out in the chat box, people. Officer Deon Joseph, who has worked the tough streets of one of America's largest cities for nearly 25 years. 22 of those years have been in the downtown LA Skid Row community. Officer Joseph is the kind of guy that's driven to create an environment of change for the homeless. He's an honest, faithful, passionate, and caring guy who I now proudly call my friend. He refuses to give up on the downtown and the downtrodden. Deon, welcome to Profiling Evil.
Thank you. You make it sound like I walk on water. I feel so welcome here. Thank you.
Oh, isn't he? Deon, that's how he made me feel. Isn't he great?
He's great, Mike. You're amazing.
I'm going to record him, just replay him in the mornings when I feel bad.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
We are just honored. Now, what I want to do, guys, before we jump into some discussion, we've got a really special thing happening tonight. And Deon, I don't know, did you see the show The Black Klansman?
I was supposed to watch it, but at the time my wife was like, I don't really need to see anything political, so I tabled it and watched it another time.
you might want to watch it after this. So one of the officer who was the original Black Klansman, he and I worked narcotics together, and he is the guy that Spike Lee reached out to. He's if you saw the Academy Awards, he was on the stage with Spike Lee as he received the Academy and several other awards. His name is Ron Stallworth, and we did a show with him here on Profiling Evil a few weeks ago. And then this week we released the podcast where we talked with Ron about his experiences of the Black Klansman. Tory, did you ever see the movie?
No, I haven't at all. It sounds
all right. So you both got an assignment. Now it's got a lot of rough language, and I keep telling Ron that it's got too rough a language for me, so I've had to watch the Netflix version that has all the swear words cut out of it. But it is an incredibly captivating show where this guy, he was working undercover, and he heard about the Ku Klux Klan forming a chapter in his community, and so he decided to write an email and apply for membership in the Ku Klux Klan as a black man. And he sent that off, and they didn't respond. He finally picked up the phone and called, and ended up getting David Duke, the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, on the phone. And he said, "You haven't filled out my application yet." And Duke made him a member of the KKK over the phone, sent him his KKK card, which he still carries today in his wallet. And he got one of his partners in the police department, a white guy, to act as him and infiltrate the KKK while they put together their case. And just a fabulous case. Well, Ron, we did a podcast that launched this week. So if you've gone to Profiling Evil, the podcast series, you can get that podcast and the others that we've done. But I want to bring in Tim from the back office to talk about something really special that Ron has made available for us tonight. So, Tim, come on in here and tell everybody about this.
Hey, I'm wondering where my glowing introduction is.
Well, I'm going to talk about you when we're done.
No, thanks for having me on. We threw together a awesome giveaway. Let me just pop up my screen here. And if you go to profilingevil.com/giveaway, there we go. Sorry to cover you up there at the bottom. You can enter to win this special edition signed book. So it's as simple as just putting in your email address. This is simply so we can contact you if you're the winner. From here, you can also subscribe to the Bolo, which I'll talk about in just a second. But at the end of tonight's choir practice, I believe we'll be announcing the winner, and you must be present to win as we announce your name on the giveaway. So head over to Profiling Evil. Be sure to open up a new tab so you don't navigate away from choir practice, and just kind of do this and listen in the background. Get signed up. You can follow social media for extra entries. And if you're already a subscriber on YouTube, you can still get those bonus entries for clicking that subscribe to YouTube button as well. So we appreciate that. And then I wanted to talk for a minute. And I believe Tyler has a copy of the actual book you'll be winning. There you go. So it comes with a signed certificate, and as you can see, it's that special edition there.
Yes, this is the author's special edition. So this is there are only a few of these out there, folks, and it's got a certificate of authenticity from Ron, and of course the book is bound just beautifully. So you don't want to miss out on a chance for this. Yep.
Before I jump off,
I say thank you for his service.
Well, I actually texted him and I said, "Hey, can you jump on?" And he said, "Only if you want to ask Patsy." And I don't dare ask Patsy to get him on that short of notice, so I lost out.
But yeah, real quick before I jump off, I just wanted to give the Bolo a shout out. That is the Profiling Evil newsletter that Mike curates. We send that out bi-weekly, and I believe the next edition, the next edition is going to be about cult behavior. So it's perfect that we were talking about cults just a minute ago. And be sure you get subscribed. That comes out on the second Wednesday and fourth Wednesday of every month, and they're a lot of fun to put together and see your reactions there. And you get exclusive content that you don't get on the regular channel. So be sure to sign up for that.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Tim. Folks, if you're into hiking and seeing cool things in the outdoors, go to YouTube and look up Tim's sessions and make sure you subscribe to his channel. He is so supportive of me. Well, folks, let's get back. I want to talk a little bit where I'm here with my special guest host tonight, Tory Shepherd, an incredible journalist from Australia and my dear friend now. We have got some special news to share a little later into the show, and we are thrilled to have Officer Deon Joseph. Deon, he personifies this legacy of community outreach, Tory, and the support he gives has been passed on to his sons. I've interacted with his wife online. What a delight, Deon. I don't know how you pulled that one off, but you have so much to bless so many lives, and your wife, your companion who keeps you on the straight and narrow, clearly has made a big difference. But folks, will you please welcome Officer Deon Joseph? And Deon, just tell everybody a little bit about who Deon is.
Well, Dion was a young man, a young African-American man who hated police officers with a passion because I was indoctrinated to. I was told by my community, my friends and family, the music I listened to, NWA was in my tape deck, F the Police was playing in my 9 Nissan Sentra, the movies I watched, and I was racially profiled a couple of times, and then the Rodney King incident hit. So I was a very distrustful of law enforcement. Even though the majority of my contacts with law enforcement were positive, it's always the trauma that sticks with you. And then I had a family business. My mom and dad, they did outreach in the community, raised 41 foster children. I was around for 17 of those kids, including their 4 children and 3 grandchildren. It was a party at my house all the time. And they showed those folks love those kids love from a place they didn't expect it. And where should they have expected it? From adult. But these were kids who were sexually abused, homeless, neglected, just mentally everything you could imagine. And it was amazing to watch my parents love them back to health, whether they were with us 2 years or 2 weeks. And then my father became a somewhat successful businessman in the city of Long Beach, and he started the first African-American owned shopping center to employ and empower African-Americans and Latinos in the community. And then that business went under after the riots. After the riots, nobody wanted to hire Black contractors, real estate agents. It was really a bad time. So I was out of job for about 3 or 4 months. I lost my apartment. I had to move back home, and my parents were about to lose their home. So I put my name in about 25 different jobs, if I remember correctly, and none of them called me. And it was an uncle and a friend of mine who said, hey, the police are looking to hire African-Americans. And I was like, the police? That police department? Oh, hell no. I saw a Rodney King incident. And but I met my beautiful queen, Tasha, and I wanted to be a good husband. I wanted to be able to support her. So I said, you know what? I'm going to put my name in the hat. And if I get it, I'll do about 2 or 3 years and quit and find something better, right? When I got the letter that I was accepted, there was a mixture of joy that I had a job, but also pain, because as soon as I saw that I was accepted, 3 of my friends, fellow African-American friends, got up and left the restaurant, and they stopped talking to me based on that. So, I went in, with all the stereotypes that was fed to me. I literally believed they were going to call me the N-word as soon as I got on the black line. None of that happened. I discovered that we learned more Spanish and human relations than how to keep our heads from being blown off in the street. And then I ended up going in the streets, and I worked with officers from all walks of life: white, Black, Hispanic, gay, straight, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, atheist. And the one thing I discovered, that 90% of everything said about law enforcement officers was false. But I acknowledge that there's a negative exception in every profession. I'd be a fool to say that there isn't. But for the most part, everybody from all walks of life are really decent human beings. And then I ended up in Skid Row. Now, where I worked before Skid Row was Venice Beach. Now, if anybody knows about Venice Beach, back then it was a beautiful, beautiful wind on Sunday afternoon, palm trees, great eating spots. I was eating Versailles every day. It was nice, right? But I was on probation. So after probation was up, Sergeant said, hey, Deon, you got to go. Probation's up. Pick a spot where you want to go. So I picked 3 spots, and one of them was downtown Los Angeles, not knowing what Skid Row was. I heard there was homeless down there, but I didn't know. So my officer, when I told him that Skid Row was one of my choices, he pulls the car over and says, what did you do? I said, yeah, Skid Row, one of my choices. He's like, oh my God, you got to wear a body condom to work there. The people are drug addicts. They smoke crack and shoot heroin in front of the station. The cops are fat and lazy and don't do anything about crime on their steps. And there's no place to eat. Now, 2 things you need to know about me is, one, I was a germaphobe. I wore 5 gloves to search people. It was really bad. And the other thing you need to know about me is I love to eat. So I went home, and I'm a man of faith. And I prayed to God. I said, God, you've never failed to answer my prayers. Don't send me to this godforsaken place that my training officer just described. And sure enough, when I got the transfer, I ended up in Skid Row, and it was the most mind-blowing, disheartening experience I ever saw. Imagine traveling northbound on the 110 freeway, and you're seeing the beautiful LA skyline, the West Coast symbol of America's economic might and power. And you're thinking, that's downtown LA. That can't be that bad, right? And then you get off the freeway, and you see people with lattes and briefcases and suits going to work, smoking. I said, hey, this is not bad. But imagine crossing into Dante's Inferno in 1 block, right? Usually when you get to bad areas, there's like a 1.5 mile stretch of land that warns you first. You're about to enter Hoodville, right? There was no warning. When I crossed Spring Street, I fell into Dante's Inferno, Mad Max Thunderdome, Waterworld. And it was the most heartbreaking thing. People with mental illness ambling through the streets with hospital gowns, homeless people shooting up in broad daylight. I saw 2 cops who had their hands full. The smell was atrocious and people having sex on the sidewalk. And I was like, I got to get the hell out of here. I can't fix this. What changed my mind was working the front desk for 2 months. And working the front desk in downtown LA was unique in the 90s. Because every 5 to 10 minutes, somebody was coming in from Skid Row with their arm broken back 45 degrees, faces lacerated. One guy came in with his intestines hanging out. And common thread was every single one of them said, I don't want a police report. Just call me an ambulance and get me the heck out of here. And I'm sure their attacker was probably waiting outside for them. That's how lawless it was back then and incredibly heartbreaking. And then I was introduced to mental illness for the first time. I dealt with mental illness because, like I said, we raised 41 foster children. Never dealt with it in this way. I never dealt with dual diagnosis, which is really horrific to go through if you're mentally ill, addicted, and homeless. And I was introduced to a friend of mine named Linda. And Linda, she twirled into the station. She had nothing on underneath. She's spinning around, knocking over the trash cans, kicking the ATM. My partner says, be careful, she's going to spit on you. And first of all, I'm like this big macho guy from Long Beach. I said, I wish somebody would spit on me. Spit on Officer Joseph, right? And she came in and saw me. And the unique thing was she froze and she walked up to me and pointed her finger in my face and says, you're my little brother. And I'm like, ma'am, I'm sorry. I don't think we're related. And she goes, shh, it's your birthday. And I look at my partner, I go, what do I do here, boss? He says, stupid, tell her it's your birthday so we don't have any problems up in here, right? So I said, happy birthday to me, right? And her eyes got big and she ran out of the station like a bat out of hell. And she came back an hour later and she had a trench coat on with nothing underneath and a Bulls. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be on the 6 o'clock news, right? I'm going to be in the paper. Officer
This is
Slade,
amazing.
right? And she walks up. She walks up to the front desk and she rips open the trench coat and pulls off this giant stuffed Tweety bird. And she slams it on the desk. I said, what is this? She said, happy birthday, Joseph. And I was like, why did you get me this? She said, because your head is shaped just like it. And I was like, oh, man. If I wasn't self-conscious enough about God taking my beautiful hair, right? So literally.
Hang on, Deon. What do you even say to a personality like this, Tory?
Mike, I thought Deon was going to make me cry with his tragic stories, and he's making me actually cry with laughter. It's just extraordinary. But Deon, can I just quickly, I didn't realize Skid Row was a real place. We talk about Skid Row all the time. Like, oh, he's really down on his luck. He's hit Skid Row. And when we talk about homeless people here in South Australia, we often say, yeah, it really hit Skid Row.
Isn't that
Yeah,
something?
a lot of people don't. Go ahead.
Well, Deon, I was just going to say, and I want you to answer that, but one of the things I find whenever I happen to have an opportunity to lecture in anywhere in Australia, the topic of violence in America comes up, and of course our huge number of weapons that are on the streets, which just freaks out Tory and every other Aussie out there. But Tory, that's interesting that you didn't realize that was a real place, and we're going to have Deon kind of describe it in detail in a minute. But how does that change maybe some of your perceptions when you go back and talk to your colleagues in Australia?
Well, I mean, when we are plagued by, I'm sure, similar issues to the US in terms of stereotypes about homeless people. And I actually did quite a lot of reporting on our homeless communities here. I've spent a couple of nights out with them. And yeah, the stereotypes are all just rubbish, but they keep getting pulled up by my colleagues as well as by the community. And in fact, just today, we've celebrated the reopening of one of our biggest and most important homelessness centres after 8 months, I think. But the whole time there have been nearby businesses who just, oh, it brings down real estate value. We don't, do you ever talk about NIMBYs? Do you know NIMBYs?
Oh, yeah.
Not in my backyard.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people
those are the worst.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, those are the worst kind of people to me. There's two extremes that created Skid Row before I go into what it is. And I'm not a political person. I'm more of a centrist. I'm right in the middle. I'm not partisan. But the extreme versions of the left and the right in America have created Skid Row, and I'll explain. You have the super, super, super far right who believe in, and some super lefties who believe in NIMBYism, not my backyard. I want to help these people. I don't want to see these people. Let's ship them on down to Skid Row so we don't have to deal with them out of sight, out of mind. And then you have the other side, the super far left, who believe that, oh, they're poor, they're homeless, we should just take our hands off them and let them do whatever they want to do because they're living in a tragic situation. Now, here's the result of that over the years. The ones on the super right and some elite lefts, they kind of create this asylum without walls, right, where it's very dangerous for the people. And then you have the folks on the super far left who actually put the people in danger in the name of decency or benevolence. And that's part of what the reason why Skid Row exists historically. So I blame both sides. But I'll talk about Skid Row, and I'll talk about what it is, and I'll try to humanize the homeless because I love the homeless with all my heart. So if you hear negative things from me, it's not that I'm trying to exploit them. I need you to see the reality so we can help them. So what Skid Row is a recovery zone. And in Skid Row, it's a 50-block radius, and it has about 108 programs, shelters, drug programs, alcohol programs, domestic violence programs, mental health programs, all designed to give people some help and hope. Now, the problem with it being where it's located is its close proximity to other cities like Compton, Watts, Inglewood, South LA, where a lot of these poor, disenfranchised individuals have no choice but to go because of, like you said, NIMBYism. Now, the problem with that is not only do they come, but guess who follows them? The criminal element. And gang members and drug dealers know there's drug programs. So where there's drug programs, guess what? That's where I can go sell drugs. And what it creates is this environment of crime, this basically criminal orgy that robs people of their incentive to change or better themselves and keeps them on an endless spiral of addiction. As a matter of fact, what most people don't know is about 2/3 of the individuals that you see on the streets in Los Angeles struggle with some form of addiction or mental illness. And that's the variable that's missing in all these efforts to help. It's almost like they purposely don't want to hear it. But if you don't hear that, you're missing out on something very, very important. Okay. Now, I told you, Skid Row attracts two groups of people, the poor and disenfranchised. It also attracts the criminal element. But let me humanize the people of Skid Row so people don't think that I'm about to say a bunch of bad things about homeless. There are 4 types of groups of people in Skid Row like anywhere else, and I'll try to make this quick. The first group are good, decent people. That's the majority of people in Skid Row, okay? There's a huge negative exception that causes a lot of problems, but the majority are decent people. The second group are good people who do bad things. These are your drug addicts, okay? When you're drug addicts, when a drug addict or someone struggling with addiction is clean, sober, and they have an environment conducive to change, you find out they're educated. They weren't born in Skid Row. They're talented. They're artistic. They're people of faith and wonderful. But when the environment is off chain, it produces a whole other thing, and I'll talk about that in a second. The third group are people who've made mistakes, the criminal element, but they have redemptive qualities. These are individuals who, if you give them an environment conducive to change and proper support with accountability, they will make better decisions for themselves. I'm a witness to that. I watched 12 men who were ex-convicts work with me in the community. We played 3-on-3 together. And I'm telling you, for 5 years, Skid Row was relatively clean and safe. We did the incredible job working with the community. And the last group, and forgive me, well, I'm not in uniform, evil bastards, okay? And these are the hundreds of individuals who prey on. Now, let me show you what's different about Skid Row juxtaposed to any other place in the United States. Because of its concentration and close proximity, there tends to be this constant and frequent cross-contamination of those 4 groups. And this is what it looks like. And pay attention around this world. The first group, the good people, they have to look the other way because crime is so high. We'll see crime and we'll see them on video. They literally witnessed it. But when we get there, they're like, I don't want to get involved. That's the good people. Then you have the good people who do bad things or drug addicts. These are individuals who can't get clean because not only is the drug dealer standing outside of the drug program and a loan shark and the human trafficker, they also get into their low-income supportive hotels and kick them out or tax them or do all kinds of horrible things to them so they can't get clean. The temptation is too great for them to succeed. For the person who's made mistakes, rehabilitative qualities, guess what? He has to make a choice, or she. Look, I'm only getting $200 a month from being released from prison. I'm seeing the drug dealer on the corner making $1,000 a day. I have to decide. If I can't beat them, I might as well join them, and they go to work. If you ever hear the term in Skid Row, you want work? I have a funny story about that, but I'll tell that later. And that's engaging in crime, extortion, brutality, and things that are horrible. And then the last group, the evil bastards who pull all the strings and make us look like the bad guy for trying to stop it by any legal means necessary. And unfortunately, they work with advocates who jump right on board and tie our hands completely. The world needs to understand that allowing those 4 groups to continue like that is detrimental to the health of anybody you care about struggling with homelessness.
Wow. Tory, what could a journalist do working with a Deon once or twice a month?
Well, I think one of the things that journalists are good at is trying to become like a superficial expert in an area really quickly and work out what's the evidence base for what works. We've had a lot of experiments here in my hometown. We tried one which was called Common Ground, which was basically just giving everyone a house or somewhere to live and then taking the services to them as a starting point. And that did have some evidence from, I think, the UK where it had worked well. But here, I think in a smaller town, it ended up, I don't want to use the word ghetto because I know it has all sorts of connotations in the United States, but it ended up bringing together all those groups that you're talking about there, Deon. So, you know, instead of sort of, you know, this quite benevolent idea of let's give everyone a home and then get the services to them, it actually brought everyone into much closer proximity. The other thing I'd be really interested in is the race demographics. Here we have done really horrible things for a very long time to our First Nations people, the Aboriginal Australians. And it's such a different, it's very different when you're talking about Aboriginal Australian rough sleepers, because often they're down here visiting and they're on their traditional lands and sometimes want to be sleeping rough, you know, with their people. We have a lot of parklands that they like to be in, but then you get police or other authorities coming through and clearing them out. We had a horrible situation where basically for the NIMBYs, the out of sight, out of minders, they banned drinking alcohol in a certain area of the city. And that was purely aimed at moving Aboriginal people out of there because they wanted to have a drink. So all the Aboriginal people went across one of our biggest highways, 4, 5, 6 lanes, and there were deaths from that, just because people wanted them, you know, not to be sullying their views. So yeah, I guess what I'd be looking at is what are the differences, but what are the similarities, and what actually works? Deon, what does work?
Well, for 5 years, we did try something that did work. It was an initiative that did focus on Skid Row, not because the people were homeless. I know right now the narrative that people are pushing is that we're criminalizing homelessness, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. I don't believe in criminalizing someone because they're homeless or mentally ill, but I do recognize the reality and the fallout of allowing it to exacerbate and spread, and that is human trafficking, drug dealing. I always tell people, you can't tell me you care about the safety of homeless women, but you're okay with the environment that allows them to be sexually assaulted every day and every night. I'm telling you, it's every day and every night. It's horrific. You alluded to the racial breakdown. The racial breakdown where I work is African American. Unfortunately, I believe about 70% of the population, and that's changing. There's a demographic shift because now we have homeless come from other parts of the country. But it's always primarily been African American for decades. And the reason for that is the 1980s. I'm surprised when journalists ask me, well, why do you think this is? And I'm like, you don't know? The 1980s was the introduction of the crack epidemic, okay? And the crack epidemic targeted and focused on inner city communities where mostly people of color lived. And they were already on the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder. So when they use crack, unlike their more affluent counterparts who use crack too, but they were able to hide it because they had their money, their buffers, right? And their drug programs and all that stuff. In these locations, they didn't have that. So when they burned out, they ended up in Skid Row because that's the only place that would house them. So you saw that shift from pretty much a multicultural area to now primarily African American. And these are individuals who came from those low income communities. That's the reality of why Skid Row is African American. But once again, it was never about their socioeconomic status. And let me explain. What would you say about a place that had in 1 year, only in a 50 block radius, 35 homicides in 50 blocks? What would you say about a place like that? What would you say about a place where 123 people die in 1 year from non-homicidal deaths? You would say there needs to be resources there. And that's why our resources are there. Because look, picture my division. It's only 4.5 miles of territory, but Skid Row is not the only place. There's Chinatown, there's all these other places. So the number one question is, well, why do you guys arrest so many people in Skid Row? Because in Chinatown, there's only 2 burglaries in 1 week, and that's from a car. In Skid Row, we had 20 people get stabbed, 2 people get shot, and 1 murder. Where do you think our resources are going to go? That has nothing to do with racism. That has to do with the data and stats that drive us there to try to keep people alive. So through the initiative that we engaged in 2006, we actually saved lives. We cut deaths down 30% using not just arrest. That's the wrong approach. We can't arrest our way out of homelessness, but using those arrests to get those people into programs that they would not go seek on their own, because you don't understand how powerful crack is. What they call it one and done for a reason. Okay. And if you don't have support in the family, you're gone. So we use that to not just enforce the law, but also change the environment, quality of life, put up street lights, trim trees, things that Skid Row needed for decades, but were completely ignored. And then lastly, we engage in outreach, and they all work simultaneously together to guide people to services. I'll give you an example of how that worked. In 2009, 2,225 individuals in Skid Row actually signed up for a program, a diversion program called SOS, Streets or Services, where they had to make a choice. You either go to jail or you sign up for a program that suits your needs. Now, 2,225 people signed up. That's beautiful. Now, of course, only about 30% of them, in my estimation, actually signed up, but 30% is pretty good. And a lot of these individuals went home to their families, checking in their drug programs. I witnessed drug program graduations going from 10 to 15 to 30 and 40. And I was invited to speak. You would think the guy that's out there crushing crime would not be invited to speak or give an invocation at a drug program graduation. But you got to understand there's a silent majority of Skid Row that will tell the truth. They needed that. They needed an environment conducive to change so that the influence of drug programs and mental health programs and service providers can be stronger than that other criminal element that was dominating for them for so long. So we have to stop looking at this as trying to hurt homeless people. Are there people like that? Absolutely. But that was not our effort. And we're missing it if we don't add that element into it.
You know, this is so compelling, Deon. Folks, we're talking with Deon Joseph and his work in Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles. Deon, if you get a chance, go to his website, Deon Joseph. Is it .org, Deon?
Yes, DeonJoseph.org, yes.
And you'll see, I mean, you can see why this guy is a motivational speaker, why he is in demand all around the world to come in and share his messaging on homelessness. I'm also here with my special guest host, Tory Shepherd, from an award-winning journalist from Australia. I want to take 1 minute, Tory, because we found a little video clip of Deon. Now, I tried to find someone, you were just a boy, Deon, but I couldn't get any to really shame you. So we're gonna show a little video clip that kind of shows Deon in action and shows downtown Skid Row. So let's pull that up, back office, and see what we got here.
What's up, young lady?
Officer Joseph.
Hi, young lady.
She stay at the Union.
Okay.
She's not familiar with Skid Row.
Okay. Here are the rules, and I'm telling you this because I love you.
Okay.
Don't borrow money from anybody.
Okay.
Once you borrow money from somebody out here, you are bought and paid for.
Exactly.
Get everything you need.
I don't look at my face because I'm an ex-celeb.
Oh yeah, don't show her face, please.
You
Use.
can show mine. Hey!
Hey, brother. God bless you. Good to see you. The mentions have everything you need as far as food and clothes. You know, but don't borrow money. If you get one of these guys trying to say they're trying to help you, be careful because a lot of times it's a trick. But usually they're trying to trap you so they can get you working on the stroll. You know, because human trafficking is real here. Prostitution is real here. And all they got to do is get you hooked and it's a wrap.
You have no idea what's going on inside these tents.
Well, I know what's happening in the tents because I would sit up on rooftops for hours and hours and observe. And so I know that guy right there sells weed. I know the guy there was a guy in a tent next to that white tent that sold crack cocaine and methamphetamines. My friend Iris, sweet lady, I won't give her a real name, but I remember she was clean and sober for about 2 years. And she came down here to celebrate her sobriety with me. And I told her, I said, baby, I'm proud of you, but you got to get the hell out of here. And she says, no, I got to go downtown. And I got to tell these folks my piece on Stan Julian. She walked right here. Excuse me, brother. She walked right here and told somebody about her sobriety. And some drug dealer / addict walked up to her and blew crack cocaine in her face. And she never left Skid Row. She overdosed about 6 times after that in a tent that was right next to the orange tent. I haven't seen her. I'm worried about her. My friend Lena Diggs, a 76-year-old woman, died right there. Died unfortunately like an animal. She's a human being.
So Deon, I mean, this is what is so compelling to me.
Because of this environment.
You know these people by name. You love these people. You have to at
Yes.
times arrest these people. There's still accountability and responsibility, but you have deeply impacted a lot of lives down there.
Dion,
Right.
what
If you
happened
notice,
to the
there's a
program?
false. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Go
Dion,
ahead.
I
I'm
talked
sorry.
over you. What happened to the program that you said was
Oh.
working so well? They defund it?
No, it didn't defund. The laws changed, and the federal courts ruled against us. They bought the advanced version of events, and it tied our hands in, and it broke the arm of the environmental aspect of Skid Row. They broke that arm of the initiative, and also in 2008 we had the housing crisis, so a lot of money kind of just disappeared, and we couldn't do the outreach as fervently as we were doing before. So those two components were gone, and crime shot up. The tents came back, and there was nothing we could do about it. And as a result, human trafficking skyrocketed. We had violent crimes. We finding sawed-off shotguns and high-powered weapons in tents, crack cocaine, methamphetamines. Now here's the part that breaks your heart that a lot of people don't know about. The streets of Skid Row are controlled. Every block is controlled by a certain gang. So if you're homeless and you come down from out of state, you try to set up in Skid Row, and you start to step on their block, they're going to step to you and say, "Hey, who the hell are you, and what are you doing here?" And you try to tell them, like, "No, if you're going to stay here, you have to do one of three things: you hold my dope, let my women work in here, or you're going to get your butt kicked, or we'll tax you." We have homeless people who get taxed. One poor lady, a friend of mine named Jacqueline, would get taxed her entire Social Security check just to stay on the sidewalk with her boyfriend. So these are the horrific things that happen to the people in Skid Row as a result of that program being basically defunded to a degree, and also federal judges. And I'm not knocking federal judges; I believe their heart's in the right place. But if you don't come down and see it for yourself on a regular basis, you won't understand. If you don't listen to the boots on the ground, and that's what a lot of people are getting away from now, and that's why in certain places in America crime is going up, because they don't want to hear from people like me who are telling you, yes, enforcement is still important. You still have to have that on top of improving quality of life and guiding people to services. And that's what happened in Skid Row. And that's why we're probably worse now than we were when I first got there in the 90s. But it would have blown your mind how clean and safe Skid Row was. 40% crime reduction, down 30%. We were saving lives. We weren't destroying lives.
So I gotta kind of transition this, and I want to talk about, and Mimi J2 just popped this really important question that helped me segue here. Do you think the Cecil Hotel is making Skid Row an easier place to be, given the reputation, Deon? And I know you and I have had a little bit of a discussion about Cecil, folks. If you haven't seen the Cecil, I mean, it's beautiful, and in the lobby, and then things start to change pretty rapidly there. But and maybe while you're talking about the Cecil for just a moment, we could pull up a story map we created on the Cecil and the Elisa Lam death investigation, Deon. And I don't think we need to spend much time on Elisa's case because we're going to have Dr. Judy Ho, who was on that Netflix series, on later this week to prepare a podcast that we're doing together, and others. But you've been in and out of that hotel as much as anybody on this planet. Talk a little bit about the Cecil, its reputation. Tory, I don't know if you saw the Netflix.
What is the Cecil? I'm picturing marble.
You're going to
lobby.
love hearing about the Cecil, and then Deon, maybe just share your thoughts on the death at the Cecil, and then the death on the sidewalks out front.
Yes. Well, that hotel, along with many others, are no different. There are hundreds of Cecil hotels in downtown LA, and a lot of people want to focus on that because of the mystery and the ghost and all this other stuff. What that incident boiled down to, and we all knew it from when we first saw the video, was mental illness. It's mental illness unchecked, someone who failed to take their medication, and in other cases, dual diagnosis. And when I saw her walking in and out of that elevator, I said to myself, first thing came to my mind was either extreme bipolar disorder or extreme paranoid schizophrenia. So a lot of things that was happening in the Cecil Hotel, happening in the hotels all over Skid Row and all over low-income sort of housing locations, including drug dealing, human trafficking. Most of you guys don't know that a lot of the people that get housed first off the street, the drug dealers, they still owe the drug dealer drug debts. So the dealers find out they're in the hotels and they knock on their door and they tax them or force them to sell drugs. And that's what causes more crime inside the hotels. And that's why it's very difficult to rehabilitate. But as far as the Elisa Lam situation, I was disappointed and disheartened because everybody cares when it's a college student from Canada. Now, all of a sudden, everybody has this interest. But I've been dealing with Elisa Lambs for 23 years in Skid Row. Mothers, daughters, aunties, brothers, sisters who were walking in front of buses, cutting themselves, jumping off of buildings, and nobody gave a damn because they were either people of color or poor whites. Nobody cared. They just said, oh, these are just addicts. That's what's supposed to happen. But all of a sudden, a college student from Canada, and once again, pressure her family. My heart breaks for them still to this day. I've seen too many Lisa Lambs, not just Lambs. I've seen Johnsons, Jenkins, Hernandez, all kinds of people that we should have been paying attention to a long time ago as it relates to mental illness. There is a true systemic failure there with mental health, and it needs to be addressed now, not later.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know if you have any comments, Tory, but folks, you can get that story map at profilingevil.com. You can go back and see some of the discussions we've had on the Cecil Hotel. And Deon, I guess one question I'd have before Tory is just your gut impression of what is the real damaging factor. Is it in Skid Row? Is it race? Is it education? Is it drug abuse? Or is it poverty?
Oh, is that for me?
Yeah, that's for you, Deon.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought you frozen, Deon.
Oh, I'm sorry. Brain fog. I just got over COVID. But anyway, no.
I know there were so many questions in that one question. For a street cop, that's hard to do. So,
you know what? Drug addiction. I don't want to call it racism. It's easy to default to the racist narrative. And I'm not saying racism doesn't exist. I've been a victim of racism. I call it classism. It's classism. Look, there are rich, white, affluent people who smoke crack. It's just that they have the money to go to better drug programs. Look, these folks, when they fall off the wagon, where do they go? Betty Ford, Malibu, Passages. They get to do yoga. There's horses running around to get them away from the temptation to fail. Our brothers and sisters in Skid Row don't have that. They literally have to get better with the drug dealer outside the door, and sometimes corrupt people who allow the drug dealer in there to keep the cycle going. So it's more about classism than racism, in my opinion, based on what I've seen. Once again, I felt horrible years ago, when this quote unquote war on drugs, they should have never called it a war on drugs. It should be a constant and never ending war on crime. You never stop fighting crime. You never stop. And what happened with those years in the 80s, for cheap labor, they're just allowed people to come from all north, south, east, and west, from all over. And that's how drugs was easily able to infiltrate into urban communities where people were already desperate. And that's what happened. It's about classism. So until we decentralize services in places like Skid Row, look, I don't want to see one drug program, one mental health program closed in Skid Row. I just don't want to see another one opened up in Skid Row when we have 88 cities in LA County and only 2 or 3 are willing to open their doors to provide low-income supportive housing for families or elderly or people that need to get away from Skid Row so they can have a chance. If we don't start decentralizing and putting these places in areas where people have a chance to survive, we're going to continue to see failure. And what I'm seeing now is people from all walks of life. It's not just African Americans. It's people from all walks of life being impacted by it all over the county and even in Orange County.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. Deon, I think it was really interesting that you said, you spotted the woman and went, right, I reckon that's bipolar. Because one of the problems we've got here in terms of stigma is we have a big methamphetamine problem. And then you hear people see anyone acting strangely and they're like, oh, they're probably a meth head. And then they're afraid of them. So they cross the street, they close their eyes, they don't want to see it. Whereas if you could recognize like, oh, it's not, this person has a mental illness, and maybe start to break down that stigma and just understand exactly what's going on with that person, I think it would probably help at least fire alarm, good. At least slow down, that division where people do just want to not make eye contact. They want to cross the street because they're lumping everything all in together, usually as meth addiction.
Well, in some cases, it's probably wise to cross the street. Not in all cases. Me, like I said, with my friend Hurricane Linda, I didn't get to finish telling her story. Her issue was dual diagnosis, and she could become violent, and she hurt people. But for some reason, she was fixated on me. I was her friend. I was her brother. And I discovered she had family in the oddest of ways. I was driving on the 60 freeway, taking my wife to a party, and I see this big, ugly burgundy Dodge van pull up next to me, and the head sticks out, her wig flies off, and says, "Hey, little brother, the birds got me, the birds." And for years, I was trying to figure out from Linda who these birds were. She kept telling me birds were taken. It was her family who would pick her up from Skid Row and try to love her back to health. And what Linda would do is, because she was dual diagnosis, she also had drug addiction, she would escape from there and come back to Skid Row, where I was the only family she had. So the stories vary. Every case is different. I know sometimes I see with a lot of people in the media, not talking about you, there's a lot of good journalists out there who they report in a way because they want to take the stigma away. Telling truth is not about stigma. From a truth-based foundation about what's happening in Skid Row and anywhere else, that's the only way we can solve the problem. We have to stop worrying about, we don't want to stigmatize them, so we're just going to put this fluffy spin on it or this soft spin on it. We have to tell the hard truths, or we're never going to end homelessness in a responsible, truth-based way.
Folks, we've been listening to Officer Deon Joseph. I hope you've been as touched by Deon's words as I have. I just want you to know, Deon, how much you mean to me, and I want to just say a quote as we thank you. This is a quote from your website. Quote, "If you are comfortable in chaos, you may be where God wanted you to be, or God called you to be." And folks, I think Deon Joseph is where God called him to be. We are really lucky to have people like you on the streets. And Deon, I hope will you come back and spend more time, because we got so many things. We didn't get to ladies' night. We didn't get to Just Like You. There's so many things that you've done down there that we need to talk about. So will you come back?
Absolutely, brother. I enjoyed myself, and you're an incredible host. And Tory, was awesome to meet you. I'd love to come out to Australia and share my story with the folks out there.
I was going to say, after you come back on the show, come down here.
Hey, absolutely. My wife and I, we dreamed of coming out there. Hey. But God bless you guys. Thank you for
from
listening.
LA. It's only 14 hours then, so you just love it. Thank God for games on your phone. That gets me through the flight. But God bless you guys, and thank you for giving me a voice. A lot of people don't want to talk to law enforcement officers now, and you're missing it when you don't. There's a lot of us that care, and thank you so much. Thank you, Tory. Thank you, Mike. God bless you.
Thanks, so good to meet you, Deon. See ya.
Thanks, Deon. Have a great night.
Good to meet you.
Well, Tory, I don't know. What do you think about that man? Isn't he something?
Oh, isn't it just amazing? And I just, I worry that we get all these processes in place to deal with these social issues, and they become ticker box exercises. So to have someone with all that passion just walking the street and getting to know everyone and knowing the names of the people that he is dealing with there is just extraordinary.
It is. Well, so we've got something really exciting to talk about. And folks, this morning in Australia, the announcement was made on national television, on Australia Sunrise and in the national press about a brand new podcast. Tory, you want to take it away and talk about this podcast?
Yeah. So this was very exciting that you got all this great coverage this morning for Mapping Evil, because I guess the way I would describe it is it's a true crime podcast, but it's so different to any of the other true crime podcasts that I have ever listened to. And I think people are going to get a real thrill out of it, partly because it's got you in it, Mike, but also because, we start with these horrific crimes that you have solved or know about in the United States, and then we take that big brain of yours and apply what you've learned there to possible cold case solutions here in Australia. And I think as we went through it, we just kept finding really interesting kind of similarities between our two countries. And it was so interesting to get your take on, what could you do here? When we've got all these cold cases that just languish for years, and they probably get, put in the back of the cupboard, gathering dust. My dog's about to have a little tantrum. He'll be right. And so, yeah, that was just extraordinary. But I guess the most important bit was the data. actually literally mapping evil, which, you know, really was not something I knew anything about before I spoke to you. And it just made so much sense, like the kind of pattern spotting and different ways that you can elevate, you know, a map into something that's actually a crime fighting tool. And really, I mean, throughout the whole, when we were recording some of these episodes, I felt bad because I was so fascinated by so many gruesome things, but behind it all is that amazing, you know, technology that allows those patterns to be seen.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what was amazing to me is listening to you pick this apart and try to tenderly be a journalist and not beat me up too much, but force me to maybe answer some questions. I don't know if we've got in the back office, maybe we could show a graphic or a link to Mapping Evil, but I was hoping that we had a little piece of the trailer that we could play so people can hear Tory in action here.
The following podcast contains content of a highly graphic nature. Listener discretion is advised.
It's chilling, actually, to think about predators roaming our highways and our byways.
I'm Tory Shepherd, and this is Mapping Evil with Mike King.
Sometimes he took couples, but he would quickly execute whoever the man was. He actually told them, "I've been doing this for 15 years." As he chained this woman to the inside of his cab and began to assault her. He fits the terminology of serial sexual sadist to a T.
The podcast series that explores the geography of crime.
We went in and I took all of Robert Benrode's truck stop records because now we could use geography and the science of where and bring it together to identify what victims could possibly be tied to this offender.
As a journalist with a keen interest in the dark side of humanity, I can't wait to delve into the root of all evil with you, as we uncover the untold stories behind true crimes from both America and cold cases in Australia, with the help of criminal investigator royalty Mike King.
I've been involved in a cult that's sexually abusing children. Do you have a moment to talk to me? And what we discovered was that literally thousands of counts of assault had been occurring. This individual was so sadistic and so sick.
People saw her coming off a train. People saw her heading down a road. She'd run into an acquaintance. And actually people even heard screams at the time of her murder. And then she's found violently beaten, dead.
Looking at it geographically, looking at what the lighting was like, what the concealment was like, what sound travels like in that area. Those kinds of things become really important as you look at these investigations. And that's where GIS can really step in and provide insight.
Mapping Evil brings you the stories behind some of the world's most evil predators. Subscribe free in any podcast app or go to mappingevil.com.au.
Like,
great.
I was there and I still want to know how it ends.
Well, I'll tell you one of the things that was so exciting to me during this process, not only was it having you come at this with a fresh set of eyes and to be able to have you ask questions that in a way that I hadn't thought of it before, was to then turn around and put you in a position to have to think like a profiler or think behaviorally, not just about physical evidence or forensic evidence. What was that like for you the first time we maybe put a little pressure back on you?
You completely freaked me out at least twice, but the first time was, you did a little profiling of me, which I did not like, and I discovered some of my own potentially serial killer proclivities, which I think ended with my actual obsession with my Japanese steel knife. There we go. And yeah, the second was really trying to, I mean, as a journalist, you're so used to sitting outside and observing and describing what people do. And so then to try and sort of crawl into the dark spaces in their head and think what it would have been like to navigate through that landscape, to spot the victims, and to work out where their vulnerabilities were. Yeah, it was fascinating and a little scary.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite episode, Tory?
Probably the cults. That was probably always going to be the thing, wasn't it? Talking to you about investigating that call and that moving footage of you speaking to the girls that you rescued from that cult. You know, that was a really big moment as we went through all the recording and so on. I've got to say, in Australia, I think it'll be interesting to see which one people here love. The South Australians will be really interested in the Beaumont children. Queenslanders are going to really be interested in us talking about Betty Shanks. So there's a range of really specific Australian cold cases that I think, particularly people who live near them and remember what it was like when those crimes were first committed are really going to enjoy delving through all the details.
I couldn't get over, and still today can't get over, the family and the case surrounding the cult that was operating there for many years, and having talked to the investigators that worked that case. I mean, it was gripping.
And that's one of the ones that I had sort of a vague memory of from when I was smaller. And then as soon as I went back and saw those creepy photos of all the kids with their hair bleached almost white and cut the same way, that a lot of it just came flooding back. So yeah, fascinating. But of course, it's like children, you're not meant to pick favorites. They're all my favorites.
Well, folks, we hope that you'll go to mappingevil.com, and there you can get the links to sign up, or just go to your favorite podcast platform and sign up for Mapping Evil, and make sure you subscribe so you get all of those. They'll be coming out every Monday, Tory, for the next 9 weeks. We are so appreciative of Ezra Australia for sponsoring that, and it's just really exciting to see that come together. And I think at the end of season 1, episode 9, I think we even share some kind of cool stuff, don't we? But we're not going to talk about it.
We might drop some big news, maybe.
Yeah, that'll be really fun.
It really will be. A great way to start your week, get into a murder on a Monday.
Murder on Monday, Mapping Evil podcast with Tory Shepherd and Mike King. And I am so thrilled to have you on tonight for Profiling Evil. I want to just kick back for a few minutes. We've kind of gone a little bit over our time, but I want to kick back and ask the back office if there are any questions that people might have for Tory. And now's the time to put her on the spot. As always, I like to try to plug my book. So if you haven't purchased Deceive, please go to profilingevil.com and purchase that. And Tory, we have really good news. We believe in the next 2 weeks, internationally, it will be available on all of the big booksellers. So we're just waiting for some final things to be.
Oh, congratulations. That's really good news. So there's a question there about the Beaumont. Sorry, Sophie, I did try to
tell Sophie H. about the Beaumont children.
So that's actually my local cold case. It is the most mystifying crime that has ever happened. And I know a lot of areas probably have this, but they always say that's the crime that changed Adelaide forever. It's when 3 children who just were going to go down to the beach one Australia Day, which, obviously here is summer and the beach is a popular place to go. And they just disappeared, and they've never been heard of again, these young children. And it got surrounded in conspiracy theories and people who claimed they knew what was going on. And I guess what really changed here was, parents were no longer letting kids go to the beach on their own. It kind of shattered that idea that we have that my hometown here, Adelaide in South Australia, was sort of a safe place. So it's the case that stole Adelaide's innocence, is how they always talk about it.
It's something, and those children, folks, when you listen to that podcast, you're going to see some things that are really troubling. Part of it is the way we used to do things, where our parents actually let us out the door in the morning and said, be home before dark. And there was no contact in between, but it's a compelling case. One that captivated me, that Americans kind of laugh at the names that you Aussies give these cases, is Mr. Cruel.
Yeah. Well, it's an obvious name, isn't it? And that's one probably for the Melbournians. I think we'll be really interested in that. And that was a series of abductions of young girls. And again, it's the sort of thing I vaguely remember at the time, some of the things happening. And then when you delve into the individual cases, as Mike starts to kind of plot them on a map. And I think, it was Mr. Cruel where we started talking about things like which, what did the aeroplanes sound like? Could you tell, if it was going north to south and there was that, and you could start to maybe pick apart where Mr. Cruel's house, some sort of animal just attacked my house.
That's better than hearing voices or something.
Yeah, well, I had a fire alarm earlier, and then some animal just landed on my roof, which is wild. Oh God, and what else? Somebody just asked about the Raddick case, which is nuts. Yeah, missing person. Mike, this is. I'm just going to send you all the links, Mike. It's really fascinating. It's a woman, a fraudster who went missing, and people thought, oh, she's she's in hiding, she's run away, and then her severely decomposed foot has just washed up on a beach in her shoe, and then other body parts washed up that turned up not to be her. And so we don't know, girl, we don't know what's happened there yet, except I guess she's been confirmed dead when I think some of us thought she was cavorting around cavorting around some lovely tropical hideaway somewhere.
Amazing. Sam Costa says, Tory, is there a specific case that really piques your interest?
Well, if I can switch to the US, then when you told me about the truck stop killer, I mean, mind blown. I think we Aussies, we often think of you guys in the US as like having lots of serial killers, and we all grew up on Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We basically, but
I'm glad that Hollywood's helping paint a picture.
No, exactly right. But the truck stop killer was a little like that, only on a scale I'd never even thought of. What was the final number of potential victims? They thought there might have been more than 500.
Well, I don't know that anyone has anything to base it with, but people at the FBI have said as many as 300. That's based on, I think, looking at all of the missing women who fit the profile, the victim selection preference that Robert Ben Rhodes had. So, it could be a lot of people. We are pretty comfortable saying 50, and I think that comes from part of his testimony. And then, of course, when you look at the numbers and the things that he did, he was doing it for 15 years. The numbers could get astronomical.
And I shouldn't have made that sweeping generalization about the US, because, of course, we have some really freaky crimes here, but also we have some really freaky films. And that one immediately made me think of Wolf Creek, which is probably maybe the scariest film I've ever seen. And I think it was so Australian, it's sort of it's a guy in the outback, and it's did you see it, Mike? Have you seen
every time we talked about that show, you referenced a single set of cases. Do you remember which cases?
No, which one was it?
Flinders Highway cases that you thought were peculiar like that?
Oh, in Australia.
Yeah.
That's the Highway to Hell. So that's another one for the Queenslanders. Not that we're blaming the state for whatever happened to them. So
that is where Crocodile Dundee's the Crocodile Hunters Park is, right? Is Queensland.
Yes, that's true. Steve Irwin's Park is there.
Yeah,
that's true.
Steve Irwin's Park, yeah. In fact, that's I actually was mauled by a pack of koalas in that park one day. So
I obviously didn't think you were going to say koalas. I thought you were going to say crocodiles and tell me.
No. I didn't go near that big thing of crocodiles, but those slow moving koalas. It was pretty loving and fun.
They actually can make a horrible and very frightening sound, and they have quite long claws, and they often have chlamydia. So, yeah, I don't know if they told you that.
Now you tell me. So Aussie Christine, who I'm assuming is truly an Aussie, said, what about other missing person cases that may have been related to Ivan Milat?
Well, and this is where Mike's particular skill set with mapping things comes in really handy, because one of the things we talked about with various serial killers was, why can't we then here in Australia have a national database with every missing person, their demographics who might fit, and start to lift out maps of where else particular killers might have struck, whether they're killers that have been caught or not caught. And maybe, that would be a new avenue of inquiry to start working out what happened to people who might, we talked a little bit about how many people do go missing every year. And a lot of the time it's because they wanted to go missing. So there could still be all these people out there who everyone was like, oh, they must have run away. But if they fit the victimology of a serial killer, then that may not actually be what happens.
Yeah, it's amazing. And of course, when you talk Outback, you guys really do have Outback. And, I talk to law enforcement here, and they talk about going into areas where they have disconnected, that their radios can't reach a signal, or there are no cell towers. And they may have hundreds of miles. When you get up in the Northern Territories, those are police officers. When I talk to them, they have a satellite phone that they can make a call once every 3 days on. And then other than that, they're on their own. Well, you talk about being able to hide bodies. You guys have a great country to be able to dispose of a body.
We've got the space. And I heard this morning on Sunrise, you were talking about, emerging technologies being able to shine new light on cases. And I think probably the satellite technology, the spread of those communication networks, the ability to get really high resolution photographs as well from space, and to really start to closely map out some of those areas that are still a little bit here be dragons is,
You're right. That is going to make a huge difference. As you look at that array of satellites up there, and the imagery that we at work pull in. Pieces of this earth are being photographed every 16 minutes, and it's resolution where you can read writing on the back of a package of cigarettes, they say. It's really remarkable where we are. Well, Tory, I cannot thank you enough for, number one, guiding me for the last year as we've worked on this podcast.
Well, you needed no guidance. It's Mike, you just wind him up and set him loose, and he'll just do an amazing job.
Well, you have been just so delightful to work with, and have become such a dear friend. And I just want everyone to weigh in real quickly to tell Tory that she has to come back, because I think it's lunchtime for you anyway when we do this, isn't it?
It is, yeah. This is perfect.
So, and Tory's a great person to know, because since it's tomorrow where she lives, she can always tell me what to look forward to. So it's really good to know what's going to happen in the news.
Yeah, heads up on the stock market, Mike.
There we go. Now, I want you to know I did receive a text while we were talking, and Mapping Evil in the first 6 hours of the day has had 500 downloads, the fastest ever in downloads. So we're really excited about folks. Go to your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to Mapping Evil. And of course, please subscribe to Profiling Evil, and stay up to date on these sessions, because you are going to just fall madly in love with Miss Tory Shepherd as we go through this. We have a lot of fun, and I can't thank you enough, Tory. It's been such a remarkable year, and you got to come back to Profiling Evil. Will you do that?
Absolutely, I'll come back. Nero will always love to come back. So I just always have to show his face, because he often makes funny little farty noises when I'm talking like that, and I don't want anyone to think it was me. It's the dog.
Well, yeah, no, and you always had to go to the studio to record for the podcast, so it's great to see you be able to do this from home. What's the next big project you're working on?
So as we're talking, I think a story I wrote earlier has just gone up online, because I could see my phone lighting up. So
good.
I know.
So what's it titled so people can look it up?
So if you go to The Guardian, it's kind of a personal story. I have to be very careful here for legal reasons. We have had a very high profile rape allegation against a very senior person, and I've written about when I met with the alleged victim and decisions I made while talking to her. I realize that sounds very vague, but
I know
I wrote
circumstance. No,
I've been with the lawyers quite some time, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you to Tory Shepherd. I cannot say thanks enough. And to have you on and guest hosting with Deon tonight.
How good was Deon?
Isn't he something? What what a lucky we can't say the police department he works for. We can say that he works in Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles, but we can't say his police department. So it's pretty obvious where he works, but how lucky that organization is to have him. Folks, go to his website. You'll learn more about him. You'll also learn more just by looking up Deon Joseph on YouTube and put in Skid Row. And Tory, I want you to take back and educate all those Aussies that I love so much that Skid Row is actually a place, and that there are amazing things going on in the midst of such ugly things going on Skid Row. So that's pretty cool.
I will see what I can do, Mike.
Thank you so much. To everyone, thanks. We'll see you next week at choir practice. For those of you who are channel members, go right over to the channel and we'll jump on and have a discussion over there. Tory, thanks again. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Mike. We will talk soon, I'm sure.
Yes, and everyone else, good night. Thank you.